Good morning, everyone. My name is Zaina Al-Shaib. I'm the Deputy Director of Communications at the Middle East Institute. I'd like to welcome you all to this on-the-record briefing session in which we will discuss Iran's political future following the death of Iranian President Ebrahim Raisi and Foreign Minister Hossein Amir-Abdollahian, whose helicopter crashed in bad weather last Sunday. Although their death is unlikely to change Iran's policy course in the short term, nonetheless, the political future of the country has now become much less predictable with uncertain repercussions. What are the political implications of their deaths? To help us dissect it all, I am delighted to welcome Alex Vitanka, Director of the Middle East Institute's Iran program, and Jason Brodsky, Policy Director at United Against Nuclear Iran and a non-resident scholar at MEI. Thank you both for joining us this morning. When we get to the Q&A portion, you can use the raise hand function on your screen to ask a question. And if you're called on, we will unmute you and you can introduce yourself and direct your question to one or both of our panelists. Questions can also be submitted in writing via the Q&A chat box on Zoom. I'll go over this again later as well, but for now, let's get right into it. I'm going to turn to Alex first. Alex, what are the implications of the deaths of both Ebrahim Raisi and Hossein Amir-Abdollahian, and does it pose a threat to Iran's stability?
Thank you, Zaina. It's great to be with you and my good friend Jason, and I very much look forward to the conversation today. Let me try and answer that question, Zaina, as part of a sort of a set of points that I wanted to mention this morning. I think, if you give me a few minutes, I should be able to cover a fair amount of ground. I want to start off by mentioning today's funeral, May 22nd. I was looking at the footage coming out of Iran, the funeral, and I kept looking for senior members of the regime that you would have expected to see at earlier years if an event like this happened. I didn't see the three living presidents of the Islamic Republic. I didn't see Hassan Rouhani. I didn't see Mahmoud Ahmadinejad. I didn't see Mohammad Khatami. I didn't see former Foreign Minister Jawad Zarif. I didn't see leading members of the so-called reformist moderate camp. It's quite telling. I mean, we've been talking for years about how this regime's tent has been shrinking, and it really was put on display today. It's the very inner circle of Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei and the sort of the senior members of the Revolutionary Guards who are attending, plus the usual suspects that you get, the leadership of Hamas, Hezbollah, and other allies. Not that many were actually there among foreign representatives. On the other hand, the regime media are showing sort of lots of footage of mass mourning and gatherings, and I won't dismiss the fact that there is obviously a outpouring of emotion by a segment of Iranian society for the death of Ebrahim Raisi and the other 7 in that crash. But what the Iranian regime media are not telling you is also the sort of, I shouldn't say happiness, loss of life is loss of life, but the fact is good, I would say a clear majority of Iranian public opinion was not upset about what happened. And in fact, when Khamenei declared 5 days of warning, now, as you're seeing on social media, many Iranians are taking that as an opportunity to go away and vacation, as opposed to sit back and listen to more regime sermons in terms of, their political message. So to your point about what it means for the regime, I want to sort of quote Ali Khamenei, who said this before it was announced that Raisi had died. And here's the simple truth. There will be policy continuity on key domestic policies and key regional and foreign policy. So if you're looking for big change on anything to do with US-Iran relations, the nuclear program, Iran's position on Israel and so forth, I think the chances of change in the short term are on that front are very slim. So the question leading up to the 28 June elections for me is something that is being hotly debated in Iran and in the Iranian diaspora. Will Ali Khamenei, who has the power to do this, open up the political space for a competitive election? Would he allow more than the usual handful of very selected few to enter the race? Remains to be seen. This is an opportunity for him. He knows he's lost the public's trust. in his regime and himself as the commander. He has an opportunity here to allow some of the folks inside the regime that we would call the reformists and moderates who are on the sidelines these days to bring him back into the fold. Perhaps he can do that, hoping he can create some excitement in Iranian society that, we just had results from Tehran in the second round of this year's Majlis elections, and 5% voted. I mean, that isn't something you can go around. There are no two ways about it. The public is no longer there behind the regime. Again, Khamenei has an opportunity to do something different, but I just don't think he will. I don't think Khamenei will take a gamble here. He is in a consolidation mode. All he wants to do at the age of 85 is to make sure everything is prepared for the succession process. So he's not going to introduce any risks into that process. He's not going to bring somebody, say the grandson of the founder of the Islamic Republic, Hassan Khamenei, or somebody of that caliber to suddenly come back in and be in the political center stage, because God knows what they might do with that political attention that they can seek. So I suspect you can anticipate the usual close lieutenants of Khamenei, people like the vice president of Raisi, who is now the interim president, Mohammad Mokhber. He's now suddenly been mentioned as a potential president, which is a surprise, but here we are. Or the likes of Mohammad Ghalibaf, the speaker of the Majlis, even someone who has been in the cold for the last few years, Ali Larijani. But what I'm saying is they will all be one way or another pretty close to Khamenei. So I don't expect any major surprises there in terms of who will be the next president. Is an opportunity for the reformist moderate movement to do something here if they wanted to take the sort of fight to Khamenei and come out and boldly demand that they be allowed to compete in these elections. Remains to be seen if they will do it. So far in these early days, I haven't seen any signs. And a lot of people are asking the question, will the death of Raisi and this next election be an opportunity for the Iranian street to come back out again and protest? Very likely that could happen if Khamenei overreaches, if there's mass disqualification of candidates. Anything that's so blatantly insulting to the intelligence of the Iranian public can be grounds for people to come down the streets. But it would be because they're insulted, not because they're excited about a candidate. And I think that's an important distinction to be made. I wanted to talk about Ahmadinejad and other possibilities, but I think I'm running out of time. Let me quickly wrap up by saying this. The one thing I am watching out for is the fight among hardliners, because the regime base, as I said earlier, has shrunk to the extent that basically the fight is happening among the hardliners, the different factions. So the most important ones are the ones around Ghalibaf, the speaker of the Majlis, the ones that were led by Raisi up until Sunday, but are still there. Who takes that leadership remains to be seen. There's the Paidari faction that is fighting for dominance in the Majlis, another hardline faction, many of whom were earlier supporters of Ahmadinejad. So that's the fight. The fight is among the hardliners. Again, it's not about the presidency as such. It's about something much bigger, which is who will ultimately succeed Khamenei when he passes away. And to be ready for that day, you need to start doing the hard work today. And I think that's where the fight could happen, if it spills out. Some of that fight has been going on. If it gets to a point where Khamenei can't control it anymore, that actually becomes Khamenei's biggest challenge. That becomes his biggest challenge, to control the infighting among the hardliners, because that's something he's never had to do before, and God knows where that would take his regime and the country. But with that, let me stop, Zaina, and turn to my good friend, Jason.
Thanks,
All right,
Alex.
Sorry, go ahead. Go ahead, Jason.
Okay, no problem. Thanks, Alex, and thanks, Zaina, and it's wonderful to be with you at MEI. I would break down my remarks into three different parts. First is that I think there are three takeaways that we can take away from the series of events that were define the helicopter crash that occurred this week. First is that I agree with Alex here. There is going to be more continuity than change in the fundamentals of the Islamic Republic's policies. The supreme leader at the end of the day is the strategic decision maker. The president is an implementer. And I often, I see a lot of commentary in Western media always focused on who the president is. And to me, that's less important than Khamenei, and focusing on him, his public speeches, who he surrounds himself with, and the architecture of and the constellation of power in the Islamic Republic, because it sends a signal to the international community as to what the system's priorities are. But on the fundamentals of the policy, they will remain unchanged. I would, just to give some context here, it's not the first time that an Iranian president has died in office. In August 1981, Mohammad Ali Raisi was killed in a bomb blast in Tehran, and it also killed Mohammad Javad Bahonar, who was then prime minister as well. There have been a series of crashes and deaths, some mysterious, some due to poor aviation safety maintenance concerns. Mansour Satari, the Iranian Air Force commander, died in a plane crash in 1995. Ahmad Kazemi, the commander of the IRGC's ground forces, died in 2006. And their presidents, former presidents, have been also faced threats to their lives. Let's not forget that Mahmoud Ahmadinejad has complained, or people around him have complained, that there have been threats to his life. Mohammad Khatami, the same thing. There is still unresolved controversy over the death of Ali Akbar Hashemi Rafsanjani, one of the founding fathers of the Islamic Republic. So I think that that's really important to note in terms of context. Raisi's demise will not fundamentally alter the broad strategic constructs of the Islamic Republic, and they remain constant. And they are the eradication of the State of Israel, pushing the United States out of the region, and also maintaining the tilt eastward in deepening partnerships with Russia and China, and improving relations with the Arab neighbors of the Islamic Republic. And I think that those priorities for the system will remain in place, whether Raisi is there or not there. As I like to look at, the constellation of power, I look to see the composition of the Supreme National Security Council, where the key decision-making in the Islamic Republic is debated. And if you look at the Supreme National Security Council, the chairman of the council is nominally the president, and the foreign minister also has a seat. And so given that Raisi and Hossein Amir-Abdollahian were killed this week, those are vacancies right now on the council. And their replacements, at least in the interim, are people who will continue the status quo. Mohammad Mokhber was Raisi's first vice president, a trusted Khamenei lieutenant, oversaw the execution of Imam Khomeini's order, which is a huge economic conglomerate controlled by the Supreme Leader's office. He has a real expertise in economic and financial affairs. So you're dealing with the ship of state, which is likely to continue with its priorities. And Ali Bagheri Khani, who's Hossein Amir-Abdollahian's successor in an acting capacity, once again was the negotiator with the West over the attempts to revive the Iran nuclear deal in 2021 and 2022. He is likely to continue the same kinds of priorities. However, where things change, I think, is the scramble that Raisi's death will set off in Iranian politics over succession. Ebrahim Raisi was the most bureaucratically experienced operator in the Islamic Republic today, up until he died. No other person could have competed with him in terms of being able to claim that they oversaw two branches of government, the judiciary and then later the presidency. And so that kind of heft is not easily replaced, and especially given the fact that some thought he was being groomed for succession. Raisi was widely viewed as incompetent during his presidency, but nevertheless, he had the trust and the bureaucratic bona fides that others lacked. So with him now out of the running, if you will, for the supreme leadership, I would say that it opens up the field to what were before second or third tier candidates who don't have the degree of administrative and bureaucratic experience that he had. For example, Mojtaba Khamenei is one, the supreme leader's son, and a lot of spotlight is going to be focused on him. But there are stumbling blocks and challenges that he has in his resume. He does not have that bureaucratic pedigree that Raisi had in the judiciary and the presidency. And there are some sensitivities in the Islamic Republic as to not wanting to appear like this is a monarchy with the supreme leadership passing to the son of the supreme leader, after especially the Ruhollah Khomeini, the founding father of the Islamic Republic, was averse to Ahmad Khomeini, his son or his relatives getting involved in politics. And I remember in, when the first succession took place in 1989, there was a lot of speculation Ahmad Khomeini would succeed his father, but he never did. I think that Mojtaba does have some headwinds, and also there is some pushback in the system, according to leaked documents, about Mojtaba's role in meddling in state affairs in his father's office. He runs a very powerful network of security and intelligence officials, but there were some elements of the IRGC who have pushed back against Mojtaba. So it's not smooth sailing for him. There are other players on the field like Ali Reza Arafi, who Alex has written about, who is a member of the Guardian Council, and just this week was promoted to a leadership role in the Assembly of Experts as the second deputy chairman of the Assembly of Experts, which is a very critical body and will choose the successor to Ali Khamenei. These are people to watch out for. There are others in the clerical elite as well that I would keep an eye on. Mohsen Komi, Mohsen Araki, people like that who are members of the Assembly of Experts. And, this clerical cohort is going to be very important moving forward. And last and certainly not least, and just to get into what Alex was saying about the presidency, I think that there are several potential candidates on the horizon. Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf is one, Ali Larijani, of course. We have Saeed Jalili, who is an extremely conservative hardline voice in the Islamic Republic, and already there's lobbying from some more pragmatic conservatives to prevent him from becoming a candidate, but he's very close to Khamenei. He's one of his representatives on the Supreme National Security Council. So you're going to have all of this maneuvering going on in the presidency, and this is not going to really change the substance, as I said earlier, of the Islamic Republic's policies, but what it will do is change the constellation of power in the mafia-like structure that defines the Islamic Republic's political establishment. And so that's why this is all very important.
Thank you, Jason. At this time, I'd like to open up the discussion to callers on the lines. To ask a question, please use the raise hand function in Zoom. Keep your hand raised until I call on you and unmute you. Then kindly state your name and affiliation and direct your question to one or both of our panelists on the call. Questions can also be submitted in writing via the Q&A chat box on Zoom. To start things off, I'll pose a question to Alex. Alex, who's running Iran today? And given the lack of strong candidates to replace Khamenei, do you see this creating an opportunity for an already very empowered IRGC?
Look, Zaina, in terms of running Iran on the big important issues, it's very clear that is the sort of two centers of power that matter the most, and the presidency is not one of the two. It's the office of the supreme leader, Ali Khamenei, the person, his personality, his vision. I mean, here's a man who believes in the idea of an Islamic civilization. That just one commitment to the idea of Islamic civilization is all-encompassing, and everything that happens in Iran, in domestic and foreign relations, is linked to that one idea, and it is his idea. So we should not forget the centrality of Ali Khamenei and the fact that he's been there for 35 years, since 1989. So there is him, and then there is the factor of the Revolutionary Guards, the Islamic Revolution Guards Corps, IRGC. IRGC is a state within a state, has its own massive empire that has political power, has economic power. It has the military wing, including control of the missiles, and to some extent Iran's nuclear program. So these two centers are the ones that have been there for a long time. In the case of our conversation today, they were implementing the policies that Iran is implementing in the region long before Raisi was really basically put forward as this potential political leader back in 2015-16, when he was taken out as being just a technocrat and made into a political figure. by then, Khamenei and IRGC already had a very fully well-developed vision for what Iran they wanted to see. So that's, again, repeating what you heard from me and Jason. Policy continuity is what to be expected there. I think in terms of vacuum, power vacuum is not a factor right now, because, again, Raisi would not have been made president had it not been for Khamenei wanted him to become president. So when you had somebody like Raisi who didn't have a political base, and he might have been, to Jason's point, someone who had deep experience in the various jobs he held inside the regime, but he certainly didn't have a political base in Iranian society, and he didn't really have necessarily much of a network other than the city of Mashhad, where he comes from, being the son-in-law of Ayatollah Alem-Hoda, who is close to Khamenei. But once he was in the presidential palace, with that job comes access to money and other benefits. And that's how you create your own network. And that's why he suddenly, from 2021 until he just passed, suddenly became somebody that, his people were getting into fights with the likes of Mohammad Ghalibaf and so on. All sorts of dirty media campaigns were run against each other and so forth. Long story short, Raisi was becoming a bigger person than he was, but he's certainly replaceable. And that, again, don't take my word for it. That's what Ali Khamenei said himself on Sunday. He is replaceable. He will be replaced.
Jason, would you like to add anything to what Alex said?
I agree with Alex's observations, and I would just add that if we look at Khamenei's reaction at the funeral today for Raisi, compared with the funeral of Qasem Soleimani in 2020, I think it's pretty telling. Today, Khamenei didn't cry. In 2020, he cried when Soleimani was killed. And I think that just shows that presidents are dispensable for Ayatollah Khamenei. I think he recycles them. I've always maintained that the presidency in the Islamic Republic is a political death sentence, and a literal one in Raisi's case. So, I think that just continues the broad trend line here. And Khamenei has been a micromanager and someone who's been a manipulator of presidents to protect his own authority and also shield himself and protect himself from blame when policies go wrong or initiatives go wrong. And that's what he uses the presidents for, as frontmen. So I think that those trend lines will continue regardless of whom is selected in this next presidential race. And, I also think that you can also see potentially some expansion of just the circle of the candidates for the supreme leadership, really. And he might try to elevate someone who we're not even thinking of to the presidency, who doesn't have a real political record, but he could absolutely engineer a situation where some cleric is pushed into the presidency that we're not expecting, because this is someone he wants in place at least to be in that role during a leadership transition. He doesn't, in my view, have confidence in a lot of people like Hassan Rouhani, Javad Zarif, even Ali Larijani, to be in leadership roles because he wants to ensure that someone in his mold becomes supreme leader during the eventual leadership transition. And he wants the presidency in a safe pair of hands. That's what Raisi was. He was the most ideal. He was the closest ideologically to Khamenei since Khamenei assumed the supreme leadership in 1989. And I think that's likely to continue. It's going to be a staged managed affair, the president, and that dynamic is important.
Another question to you, Jason. What are some of the challenges of mounting an election in 50 days, given the low turnout in the last election? And I mean, something you've touched on earlier, will there be any serious rivals? Will they actually open up the race for people from the outside, people that are more moderate?
Turnout is going to be a very big challenge. I think there's no doubt about that. If we look at the trend lines from the last parliamentary elections and Assembly of Experts elections, many Iranians call them selections, but they were record low turnout, and that just shows that the majority of Iranians are really dissatisfied and want the regime gone. And that is they've been through the reformist era, they've been through conservatives, and nothing changes at the end of the day. And so I think it's going to be a Herculean task for the Islamic Republic to try to generate turnout for this election. It could, at the end of the day, Khamenei could, as Alex mentioned, open up the race to some more acceptable candidates to certain segments of the Iranian population, like Ali Larijani and people in that mold. But again, I remain skeptical given Khamenei's track record and modus operandi in recent years. He is single-handedly and singularly focused on succession. And I think that he wants someone in that role who he can depend on, because let's not forget, the president actually constitutionally can serve on an interim leadership council if the supreme leader becomes incapacitated or dies. And he wants someone in his mold in that post in these sensitive times. Khamenei is 85. He's had health conditions in the past. And so that's something to watch.
Alex, Iran is grappling with internal discontent due to the economy and the regime's violent crackdown on dissent. How wide is the gap between Iranian society and the clerical rule?
It's the widest it's ever been, Zaina. I mean, there's no two ways about it. Again, one has to just listen to that debate inside of Iran. The realities that are being pointed to by media that are linked to the regime. They openly talk about the various problems the regime is facing. You know, Iran has become a society where being hopeful is something that you don't really come across that much anymore. It's one of pessimism. It's one where, you know, all the indicators that one could point to, from brain drain, capital flight, to, you know, people not having children, to unprecedented rates of divorce, depression. So there are all sorts of factors one can point to that would suggest that the Iranian society is not feeling good, hasn't been feeling good for a very long time. The Iranian society is ruled by a group of people that really want to pretend that the society they're ruling over you know, will hopefully emigrate, will go away, will stop being there, stop bothering them. And they're happy to have the, whatever, 15-20% of society that supports this regime for whatever reason, that they kind of are their base, they stay there, and everybody else can either go away, and if they don't go away and if they make noise, you repress them. I think the distance has never been this great, and this is the biggest of challenges for people who are perhaps have the potential to one day replace Khamenei. Khamenei has been there for 35 years. The reason why Iran is where it is today is because of Khamenei. He's a man who believes very much in hard power. He's a man who does not believe in compromise. He will tell you those two attributes is exactly the reason why he has lasted for 35 years. Hard power, not compromising. He's not going to compromise because he was there in 1978, 79 when the Shah started compromising, and that was the end of the Shah era. So Khamenei learned that lesson. When you're faced with opponents, you hit them hard, twice as hard as you hit them yesterday. And unfortunately, that's where he's at right now. And Iranian society has taken it for a long time, but the anger is not going to go away. These problems that I just described before are not going to go away. And this anger used to be sort of limited to parts of Tehran or other big cities in Isfahan, Tabriz, and Mashhad. But the anger is now spread across the nation. A nation of 90 million people, sanctioned heavily, where corruption is rife. The regime doesn't want to listen to your grievances, doesn't have solutions. You have one customer as far as economic trade is concerned. It's called China. And for that reason, I don't think this distance that I'm talking about is something Khamenei certainly in his lifetime can fix. But again, the challenge is for those people eyeing the post-Khamenei Iran, if this regime can stay in power, should they not really start thinking about doing things very differently than they have done in the last many years? And you know, time will show if they can basically pass that test.
Staying with a point you mentioned, China. Iran has forged closer ties with both Russia and China under Raisi. How much of it was institutional versus personal?
Yes, if you look at it in terms of the newspaper headlines, yes, year 2023 was a great year for Iran moving closer to Russia and China. Iran joined officially, after many years of waiting, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. Iran was admitted into the bloc that we call a BRICS countries, that is essentially a counterweight to, if you will, the West. So that on paper looked very good. But the reality is that, and this is something Jason pointed to earlier, that was a trend that started years ago. The Look East policy started years ago. And it's essentially a reflection of Khamenei being unable to kind of come up with a solution to his obsession with the West, basically. For him, his inability to deal with the West, compromise on various issues that are obviously between the two parties, left him no choice but to turn east. And he was steering, he was the captain of that ship, even when Hassan Rouhani was there, even, when Rouhani was there, the moving towards the east was happening at Khamenei's level, even though we all know Rouhani preferred the West. And his team preferred the West, if you will. So, and one final thing I say about China and Russia, Zaina, they are the ones who are benefiting from this relationship with Iran, more so than even the Islamic Republic is benefiting. China today is not investing the $400 billion it promised a few years ago to invest in Iran. Russia is taking Iranian oil market share in places around the world after it became sanctioned. So, I mean, yes, there are cooperation, and one shouldn't underestimate the level of cooperation. We can point to the supply of drones by Iran to Russia, how they work together to undermine U.S. interests in the region. All those things are realities. But at the same time, we should be careful not to ignore the fact that there are also some serious restrictions in terms of how far Iran can go in relations with Russia and China to advance Iranian national interest as opposed to the narrow interest of Khamenei and the Revolutionary Guards.
All right. Jason, what impact, if any, will the death of Raisi and Amir-Abdollahian have on Iran's nuclear program?
I don't think it will have any direct impact, and let me explain why. These decisions on the nuclear file, the strategic decision-making is with the supreme leader. The decisions on the nuclear file really are made by the IRGC and the Supreme National Security Council with Khamenei's blessing. That's the structure here. The president is an implementer, maybe a decision shaper, but he is not a decision maker. And so this will remain constant. And I think there's going to be more continuity and change, especially because Ali Bagheri Khani, at least in the short term, is the acting foreign minister. And he was the one who was a negotiator with the West as it unsuccessfully tried to revive the Iran nuclear deal in 2021 and 2022. So, and also Ali Bagheri Khani has been the counterpart that U.S. officials have been meeting with indirectly in Oman to discuss the nuclear file and other regional concerns. So there's going to be more continuity than change here. Ali Bagheri Khani is carrying the messages not back necessarily only to the president, but ultimately the supreme leader and the office of the supreme leader. And that's where the decision-making is going to lie. I think Iran right now is quite content with where its nuclear program is at, because it gets to dangle the nuclear program like a sword of Damocles over the West and say, if you pressure us more, we're going to enrich to 90% or manufacture a nuclear weapon. And so it uses it as a point of leverage in this respect. And so it's quite content right now. And also it's content with the fact that, it can still advance its program because in my view, it does not fear a credible military threat from the United States. And this is especially the case because the Biden administration has been very risk averse when it comes to Iran generally. And it wants to avoid a crisis, and it wants to keep the issue off the president's desk. And the Iranians know it. So they're trying to see what they can get away with. And this is not going to change with the president being, switched in the aftermath of Raisi's death. The personalities around the nuclear issue may change. I think that it remains an open question as to who will be the foreign minister should a new president take over, who will be the head of the Atomic Energy Organization should the new president president take over, let's remember the head of the Atomic Energy Organization is also a vice president. So that could switch if there's a new president right now. According to public reporting, the new president will be in office for a 4-year term, not just the year left in Raisi's term. So I expect more continuity than change.
All right, I have a question to both of you. We kept hearing about Iran's drone technology and advancement and so on and so forth, but the crash revealed that Iran may not have been as ready to deal with a catastrophe of such magnitude as they needed to rely on Turkish drone to locate the crash site. Was it surprising that Iran lacks the adequate technology? We could start with you, Alex.
To be honest, I think, when you think about the simple fact that this helicopter that I was reading in Iranian media earlier this morning had been delivered by the United States to Iran in 1973. For them to have this uninsured, half-a-century-old helicopter to fly it over land in northwest of Iran that is famous for its tall mountains in thick fog, I mean, if that's not incompetence, then I don't know. I don't know how I'll explain this. The issue of drones, how long it took him to find the wreckage, the fact that it took over half a day to announce that they were dead, the passengers were all dead, the fact that Khamenei came out before we knew that the helicopter had crashed and basically prepared the nation for the big news. This has created all sorts of theories in terms of, was this really a crash or not? I don't know if, obviously the United States has come out and said, please don't look at us. We had nothing to do with it. Everyone is going to point the finger at Israel. But to be honest, as you've heard me and Jason describe it, and Israel for sure has eliminated Iranian officials inside of Iran in recent years. That's hardly a secret. But would Israel gain anything from eliminating Raisi? There's a psychological blow. There is a point that Israel can say, look, I can do this. But then from an actual point of view, what does it matter for Israel, given that we know Raisi wasn't running the show in the region where Israel is feeling the Iranian the pressure from the Iranians the most? So again, because I'm already going into the realm of too much speculation here. This is either a technical malfunction, incompetence on the part of the Iranian authorities, or maybe something as part of a domestic political rivalry, because that makes a lot more sense than pointing the finger at foreign adversaries, given the fact that Raisi wasn't a key decision maker.
Jason?
I would agree with Alex. I think, as I mentioned earlier in my remarks, there's a long tradition of plane crashes in the Islamic Republic. Let's not forget that Raisi's sports minister had a helicopter crash, and some of his assistants perished in that helicopter crash. So there is a long track record here of poor maintenance and a lot of incompetence as well, unfortunately. And these kinds of events happen. I would also say that yes, there are, there's great tradition of conspiracy theories in the Islamic Republic's political culture. I think we're already seeing a lot of those running wild on social media. But at the end of the day, it could have been just a technical malfunction. And I think that there's a striking contrast between the high-tech technical advances that we see the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps unveil with its missile and drone program, and it's in striking contrast to the decrepit nature and state of a presidential helicopter for Ebrahim Raisi. He's was riding on a helicopter from the 1970s. So I think that just goes to show you how much importance the system places in the president, as opposed to the leader and the IRGC. And that split screen is quite dramatic and speaks for itself.
Thank you, everyone. It looks like we're going to have to wrap things up now. I hope you will join me in thanking Alex Vitanka and Jason Brodsky for participating in this week's session on Iran's political future. We really appreciate your insight and your willingness to share your morning with us. If you find these calls valuable and want to learn more about other resources MEI can provide, do not hesitate to reach out to us. We would be more than happy to connect. I wish you all the best and hope you have a great rest of your day.